What's up guys, it's Tom here and welcome to a brand new football news video, and we have great news today. The Premier League are given the green light to start professional football and start the Premier League games from June the 1st. The British government have given the Premier League the green light to resume the competition, and they are planning to resume the Premier League on June the 12th, and they are aiming to get the Premier League completed until July the 27th, and after that, if it's allowed, then the Champions League, the Europa League, the FA Cup will be completed, and then in September the Premier League can restart with a new season. So let me know guys, what do you think about these plans? Are you happy about it? Do you have any concerns? Leave them in the comments below, and if you enjoy these, leave a like and subscribe, turn on the bell notifications so you never miss the latest football and Liverpool news. So football in the UK has been suspended for many months now, and Premier League clubs are committed to finishing the season, but there is a massive problem that we will talk about in the second part of this video, that the majority of the bottom half Premier League clubs don't want any relegation once the Premier League resumes, which is quite weird. I don't know why they honestly think that the Premier League could change the rules midway through the season. The FA needs to ratify that and needs to allow it, and also I think it's a little bit churlish coming from the bottom half clubs that they want no relegation, not because of the virus or anything, but because they want to save their club from getting relegated. And the Premier League, of course, have maintained that any move to bring the games back must be in line with government protocol and under measures set out by Prime Minister Boris Johnson. As part of his roadmap out of the lockdown, sport will be permitted to be broadcast from behind closed doors from the start of next month at the earliest, while avoiding the risk of large-scale social contact. So behind closed doors, and the games will be played, each game will be played at a separate time, so the full exposure can be had from either broadcasting it live on your TV or broadcasting it live on Facebook or YouTube or any other platform. Amazon Prime has some Premier League games, and they will probably broadcast some Premier League games. So in June you can expect the Premier League to resume, and hopefully Liverpool will be crowned champions in July, when at least when the Premier League finishes, but hopefully we can wrap it up in one or two rounds once we play, I think, Manchester City. That could be the game that wraps up the Premier League title. But let me know guys, do you think it's best to play these games in neutral venues, or do you want it to be played in every club's home stadium? Which is the better option for you guys? Let me know, because that is the most contentious issue with the bottom six clubs also anxious to have relegation actually taken off the table in the event the Premier League season cannot be completed. Brighton, Aston Villa and Watford have been vocal critics of the proposal, saying that removing home advantage will have a damaging effect on the integrity of the Premier League. So that's the main reason why the bottom six or the bottom 8 clubs want no relegation, is either you play at their at your home stadium, or you play at a neutral venue. But to my understanding, still you are playing behind closed doors. So what difference does it make to play in your home stadium or to play in a different stadium? You won't have your fans there anyway, so I don't understand why it would damage the integrity of the competition. If you can't play at the home stadium, you are not playing in front of your own fans anyway. So that's why I really struggle to get the full issue with this. But there are some problems other than of course relegation or no relegation. A third Brighton player tested positive for the virus on Sunday, and he is now in self-isolation for 14 days. Similar incidents happened in Germany and Spain. In Germany, the whole Dynamo Dresden squad, they are a Bundesliga 2 club, second division club, are in self-isolation because 3 of their players tested positive as well. And nobody really knows when the Premier League games will be played in front of fans, because I think that's still many months away. Of course, either we get a medicine or vaccine for this virus. Until then, I really very highly doubt that the Premier League or the British government would allow the Premier League games to be played in front of many thousands of fans, because that would just increase the risk of getting a second wave of this issue in autumn or winter. So Sky Sports are reporting that the majority of bottom half clubs want relegation scrapped with neutral venues more likely, and clubs have been warned that not restarting the league at neutral venues could cost them more than relegation. At least 14 clubs need to agree and back the proposals before games can actually restart, and the majority of clubs in the bottom half actually want relegation to be scrapped. So no relegation. Norwich, Aston Villa, Bournemouth, Watford, West Ham and Brighton especially want no relegation if the games are played at neutral venues. They are citing that they have a much bigger home win percentage than away win percentage. I have the stats for you guys. So Norwich gets 1.07 points per game on average at home, and they get only 0.4 points per game on average. Aston Villa get almost 3 times as many points at home as they are getting away from home. Basically they have 1.3 points per game on at home and 0.5 points per game away from home. Bournemouth, Watford, Brighton are in a similar scenario where they are actually getting almost twice as many points at home as they are getting away from home. But as I said, if you are playing without fans behind closed doors, how much of a difference does it make if you play at your own stadium? Yes, I know that players would be familiar with their own stadium, but still, without fans, it's not as much of an advantage as playing with fans or in front of fans, in my opinion. And those clubs who want the threat of relegation actually removed from this Premier League season, they actually think that games would be played in completely different circumstances to the rest of the season, so it would be unfair to relegate 3 teams on that basis. The different circumstances will be different for every single club, so the bottom 6 sides wouldn't get any disadvantage compared to the other teams. So you can still fight against relegation on the pitch. I just wouldn't understand if the Premier League allowed this, because a large majority of the actual Premier League games would be absolutely meaningless if there was no relegation from the Premier League. I mean, most of the games having teams who either are in mid-table or are like already qualified for the Champions League, or who are already safe. So the majority of the games are either you have a team who are trying to get into the top 4 or top 6, or in Liverpool's case, one team are trying to win the league, and the whole bottom half are trying to stay up and fight against relegation. So almost every game would be very meaningful, and they would have a lot of tension and a lot of hype around them. But if you have no relegation, then basically like 70-75% of the Premier League games would be totally meaningless, and not that many people would watch it, and also it wouldn't be as competitive, in my opinion. So I just don't understand why and how the Premier League bottom 6 or bottom 8 clubs think that no relegation is a fair rule change when you already played 75% of the whole season. That's what I don't get. There are also concerns that some players may refuse to play for health and safety reasons. For example, today Tyrone Mings tweeted out that when a player playing for a top club voices his concerns against like restarting the season, then that's no problem. But if a player in the bottom half of the Premier League voices his concerns, then everybody is saying you just want to avoid relegation. And I get that point of view. I understand that it might be unfair to label everybody with the same brush, but I still think that no relegation just doesn't make sense to me at all. And also there are the concern of many players being out of contract after June the 30th. So basically you could have a scenario where a lot of clubs would lose loan players or players who only have like a month left on their contracts in the middle of completing the Premier League season. Like June the 30th is probably in the middle of this 9-game period which is left of the Premier League season. The Premier League are also discussing drastic potential rule changes, the introduction of 5 substitutions, and also maybe the potential of scrapping VAR, which could make the remaining games different from the rest of the season. But still, that's not, for me, that's not enough reason to scrap relegation, in my opinion. And the clubs who actually want relegation removed have been warned that scrapping the relegation would make the competition less attractive to broadcasters, and it could affect the value of TV contracts. I mean, the broadcasters and the TV deals were signed at the start of the season when relegation, promotion and fighting for European places, it was all implemented in the season. So I would totally get if the broadcasters would be very angry at the Premier League if they allowed a sudden rule change in the last fourth quarter of the Premier League. And EFL chairman Rick Perry has threatened a legal action, and he said that the EFL would sue the Premier League if relegation was scrapped and if championship clubs are prevented from being promoted. But even if relegation are scrapped and championship clubs are let promoted, that would mean 23 teams next season in the Premier League, and the Premier League next season will be even shorter in terms of the fixture congestion. It will be a lot higher. So how on earth are they planning to fit in like 44 games in the Premier League season next season instead of 38? It just doesn't make any sense to me. I have to say this, the majority, the largest part of the Premier League's players want the competition to resume, and they want to start playing again and training again. So this is just a vocal but small minority of players who have concerns with restarting the league. And Andy Dunn, the chief sports writer of the Daily Mirror, said this: the Brighton and Dynamo Dresden developments are indicative of the type of hurdles that will have to be surmounted if you want to get Premier League football back on. Issues are going to come up every day. Whether these hurdles can be surmounted remains to be seen, but it seems the government will do all they can to help the Premier League get the season back on. The will is there. My position has changed. I think your opinion should be allowed to develop. At the start, I thought the season should be null and voided. This was something we couldn't foresee. I was against football returning in some sort of biosecure bubble. I was thinking, let's not play until it's safe for fans to come along. It's clear that's not going to be the case for a long time. But as time goes on, I've come to think that while I don't agree football will suddenly lift the whole nation, the spirits of the nation will only be lifted when the death rate is tumbling, there's more PPE and testing, and when there's a vaccine on the horizon. But will football be a welcome distraction, as something to fill a void in people's lives, if only for a few hours? Of course, this is on the proviso we make it as safe as possible, but I think yes, it would. We know many people have been touched by tragedy, hundreds of thousands, soon going into millions. It jars understandably with them that we might be talking about football coming back while this tragedy is unfolding day by day. But I don't think by saying that football might be a distraction from the daily gloom that you are being disrespectful to people who have sadly been affected by this tragedy. And I think football clubs just cannot survive if you have 12 or 18 months with no football. 90% of the clubs would just go out of business, out of existence. Do we really want that? Do we really want 90% of clubs to just vanish from the face of the earth? And many people's livelihoods, many businesses are tied into football. So not just footballers, but a lot of people will lose their jobs, their house, their life, and we don't want that. Paul Hayward, a chief sports writer for the Daily Telegraph, said this: as soon as the government indicated its desire to get football back on, it was going to get back on. I think the Bundesliga will serve as the laboratory for all the technical issues. The Premier League can use the lessons they get to get their own operations right. I think football is coming back is a good thing within limits. If the risks can be managed medically and scientifically, but nothing is straightforward. The big resumption problem is one of perception. It's about the industry, jobs, livelihoods, raising spirits of the country, but I don't think that message is getting across. People think it is about the money, TV contracts, some of it is about greed, but not all of it. The Premier League has to be better at saying that it is also about the jobs and livelihoods. It's important to remember that this is not just for us. Horse racing is resuming, the Bundesliga is days away from resuming, La Liga is set to come back in June, and Spain had one of the strictest lockdowns, a lot stricter than the UK. It's not just the supposed arrogance of English football, we should see it as an industry-led issue. Football is entitled to ask how it can get going again safely and properly as any other industry. I don't think it should be shamed into thinking that's something dishonorable. The difference is, of course, that football is a contact sport, and that's something still very hazy in people's minds. When you start thinking about people grappling, shoving, that doesn't sit well. Another problem is the idea that football would be taking resources away from the NHS, but there are details emerging of a privately funded arrangement for the Premier League. You can argue about whether that's ethical or not, but if football can persuade the public that it's about picking an industry back up and giving people a distraction, I would be in favor. Mark Ogden, the senior reporter of the ESPN, said this: I agree that football has to come back. Industry and society will come back at some point, but will carry some degree of risk. Life is going to be different. There will be risk involved, but there is risk involved in everything. As long as that isn't beyond acceptability, football is a massive industry that generates tax and employs thousands of people. I had a conversation with someone at the club the other day who said they were getting 10 WhatsApp messages a day from players asking when they were coming back. The safety of players and their families is key, but there are a lot of players who want to come back because it's their livelihood. Every kind of industry at the moment is trying to tiptoe its way back, and I don't see why football should be any different. Football has to be careful. It doesn't become the government's punchbag. It will only return when the government says it is safe to do so. It can't do it off its own back. And every club has to look at their own issues. Watford's issues, for example, are totally different to Liverpool's at the top. Clubs are thinking of safety, but beyond that, their futures are at stake. And that's why I think it's wrong that many clubs are opposed to relegation, because it's just not fair. How can you change the rules in the middle of the season? But let me know, guys, if you think it's fair or not in the comments below. And thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. See you later. Goodbye.